No, we're rolling, Steve.
Last week we completed the largest voter registration drive we've done in our history. 1.3 million new voters, largely lower income, 70% people of color, mostly young people. This was really a historic effort by ACORN to involve people in the democratic process, and that's really what ACORN has been doing for 38 years now, since 1970 when we first got started in Little Rock, Arkansas. I mean, the goal then, as is the goal now, is to make sure lower income families who don't otherwise have a voice can organize together so that collectively they have a voice and power to make a difference in their communities, in their cities, in their states, and in the country. And voter registration and voting is a key part of that. I mean, it's not all ACORN does. We lobby, we have rallies, we issue studies and reports. We look for ways for our members to directly engage with lawmakers and policymakers and make their voices heard. But it is a critical piece of what we do, and it's what makes lawmakers and policymakers listen to us, to know that we also empower our members and their neighbors through voter registration to get out the vote. The voter registration drive we just completed is really just the first step. Now, with 3 weeks left before the election, we are embarking on a very massive get out the vote effort. Registering 1.3 million voters is really doesn't mean anything unless we get people to the polls. And so now the same workers who were registering voters are talking to their neighbors, talking to the new registered voters, and talking to them about the issues that are at stake in this election. And the goal is to get all of those new voters, or those new registrants, to the polls, and their neighbors and other infrequent voters and other new voters. We think we're going to see record turnout in November. So one of the things that I know people have been interested in is the whole question of faulty registration forms that are being turned in. And the unique thing about the ACORN voter registration program is that we have really the most extensive and expensive quality control program in the country. Every card that comes in, every night we have a team of quality control people who call the person on that card to verify that that's a real person and that they were really approached by one of our workers during the day and registered. If they can't reach the person, or if the card is incomplete, or if the card is obviously made up in someone's name who doesn't exist, those cards are separated, segregated, bundled, and packaged in a completely separate pile. And then we turn in that pile separately to the Board of Elections along with the valid cards. And the reason we do that is because under law, we are required to turn in all of the cards. We are not public officials who have the right or power under law to determine if a card is valid. That's really only up to the state, local officials, election officials. So we have to turn in those cards. We say, these cards aren't good. You should do some further investigation. And it's those cards that, unfortunately, our opponents in very partisan attacks have been pointing to as evidence of so-called fraud.